The text came at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, 3 weeks before my parents' silver anniversary celebration. I was sitting in my small home office, reviewing quarterly reports for my real estate portfolio when my phone buzzed. Victoria, we need to talk about the anniversary party. After much consideration, your father and I have decided it's best if you don't attend. We're ashamed of your lifestyle choices and don't want to explain your situation to our friends. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Mom. I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling the familiar sting of rejection that had become routine over the past few years. My situation, as Mom called it, was that I lived modestly in a small apartment, drove a 10-year-old Honda, and worked from home doing what they considered playing on the internet. What they didn't know was that my internet playing had generated over $43 million in real estate investments across 3 states. But explaining that had become impossible years ago when they decided I was the family disappointment. I typed back, "Okay, enjoy your celebration." Then I opened my laptop and pulled up the file I'd been working on for the past month. The Grandview Estate Purchase Agreement, scheduled to close tomorrow. The most prestigious event venue in the city, where my parents had booked their anniversary party 6 months ago. By 3:15 p.m. I owned it. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had specifically chosen the Grandview estate because it represented everything they thought I lacked: success, sophistication, social standing. The venue had been booked solid for over a year, and Mom had bragged to everyone about securing the impossible reservation through her social connections. Now those same social connections were about to discover that their carefully orchestrated celebration was taking place in a venue owned by the daughter they were too ashamed to invite. I spent the next 3 weeks preparing. Not for revenge. That felt too crude, too beneath what I was trying to build. Instead, I was preparing for education. My family had spent years operating under false assumptions about my life, my work, and my worth. It was time for a gentle correction. The Grandview estate came with an experienced management team, led by a woman named Patricia Hendricks who had been running high-end events for over 15 years. When I explained the situation, she was initially confused, then intrigued, then fully on board with what I had in mind. "So let me understand this correctly," Patricia said during our planning meeting. "Your parents are hosting their anniversary party here, but they don't know you own the venue, and they've specifically uninvited you from the celebration?" "That's correct. And instead of canceling their event or causing a scene, you want to?" "I want to handle this professionally. They can have their party exactly as planned. But I think it's time they learned a few things about their daughter's actual circumstances." Patricia smiled. "Mrs. Chin, I think this is going to be a very interesting evening." The day of the anniversary party, I drove to my parents' house in the suburbs. Not to crash the party or create drama, but to drop off a gift. A small envelope containing a key and a note that simply read, "For your 25th anniversary. With love, your daughter Victoria." Mom answered the door wearing an elegant burgundy dress, her hair professionally styled for the evening's festivities. She looked beautiful, and for a moment I felt genuinely sad that we'd reached this point in our relationship. "Victoria," she said, clearly flustered by my unexpected appearance. "I thought we discussed this. Tonight is important to your father and me." "I know, Mom. I'm not here to cause problems. I just wanted to give you this." I handed her the envelope. She accepted it reluctantly, like it might contain something dangerous. "What is it?" "Just a small anniversary gift. You can open it whenever you'd like." Dad appeared behind her, adjusting his bow tie. Robert Chin had always been a handsome man, distinguished in that particular way that comes from years of success in business. His architecture firm had built half the commercial buildings in the city, and he carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to respect. "Victoria, what are you doing here?" His voice wasn't unkind, but it wasn't welcoming either. "Just dropping off a gift, Dad. I'll let you get ready for your party." "About tonight," he said, and I could see the discomfort in his eyes. "I hope you understand why we made this decision. Your mother and I have worked very hard to build certain relationships in this community, and I understand completely, Dad. You don't want to explain why your 30-year-old daughter lives like a college student and doesn't have a traditional career." The relief on his face was obvious. "Exactly. I knew you'd understand." What he didn't understand was that my response wasn't agreement. It was acknowledgement. I understood their perspective, their priorities, their values. I just didn't share them anymore. As I drove away, I could see neighbors arriving to wish my parents well before they left for the venue. The Hendersons from next door, the Patels from across the street, the Williams family from the corner house. All of them would be at the Grandview estate in 3 hours. All of them would witness whatever was about to unfold. I went home, showered, and put on my best dress. A simple black number that was elegant without being flashy. Then I drove to the Grandview estate not as a guest but as the owner. Patricia met me in the back office as the first guests began arriving for cocktail hour. Through the security monitors, I could watch my parents greeting friends and family in the marble foyer, everyone admiring the venue's crystal chandeliers and hand-carved woodwork. "Everything is proceeding exactly as they planned," Patricia reported. "Cocktails until 7, dinner service beginning at 7:30, dancing until 10. Your parents seem very pleased with everything." "Good. That's exactly what I wanted." At 7:45, with dinner service in full swing, I gave Patricia the signal. She walked into the main dining room wearing her professional event manager smile, carrying a microphone and a folder. "Ladies and gentlemen," Patricia's voice carried clearly through the room's excellent sound system. "I hope you're all enjoying this beautiful anniversary celebration for Robert and Linda Chin." Applause filled the room. I could see my parents beaming at their head table, surrounded by their closest friends and my father's business associates. "As the event manager here at Grandview Estate," Patricia continued, "it's my privilege to share special messages from family and friends who couldn't be with us tonight. We have a particularly meaningful message from someone very close to the anniversary couple." Mom and Dad exchanged puzzled glances. They had specifically ensured that all their important family and friends were present tonight. "This message comes from Robert and Linda's daughter, Victoria, who wanted me to share something special with everyone gathered here tonight." I watched through the monitors as confusion rippled through the crowd. My parents looked genuinely bewildered. They knew I hadn't been invited, so how had I arranged to send a message through the venue? Patricia opened the folder and began reading. "Dear Mom and Dad, congratulations on 25 beautiful years together. Your love and commitment to each other has been an inspiration to everyone who knows you." The crowd smiled, touched by what seemed to be a daughter's loving tribute to her parents. "As you celebrate this milestone surrounded by the people who matter most to you, I wanted to share some thoughts about family, understanding, and the different ways we show love." Patricia paused, making eye contact with my parents before continuing. "For the past few years, you've been concerned about my lifestyle choices, my career path, and what you've called my situation. You've worried about how to explain your unmarried daughter who lives modestly and works from home. Tonight I'd like to help clarify things." The room was completely quiet now. This wasn't sounding like a typical anniversary tribute anymore. 3 weeks ago, you decided you were too ashamed of me to have me attend your anniversary celebration. You were afraid that having me here might reflect poorly on the family you've worked so hard to build. I could see the blood draining from Mom's face. Dad was looking around the room trying to gauge the reactions of their guests. "I want you to know that I understand your concerns completely. Image matters. Social standing matters. The opinions of respected friends and business associates matter. I get it." Patricia's voice remained warm and professional, but every person in the room understood that something significant was happening. "So I decided to give you a gift that might help explain exactly what your daughter's situation really is." She reached into the folder and pulled out a document. 3 weeks ago, right after you uninvited me from tonight's celebration, I purchased this venue. The Grandview Estate, where you're celebrating your anniversary tonight, is now owned by Chin Properties LLC, my real estate investment company." The silence that followed was deafening. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Conversation died mid-sentence. Every eye in the room was focused on the head table where my parents sat in stunned silence. "Your daughter's modest lifestyle has been funded by a real estate portfolio currently valued at $43 million. Spread across 78 properties in 3 states. Mrs. Patterson, Mom's closest friend, actually gasped audibly. Mr. Williams, Dad's longtime business partner, was staring at my parents like they'd suddenly grown second heads. "The daughter you were ashamed to have at your anniversary party owns the venue where you're holding your anniversary party." Patricia smiled warmly at the crowd. "Victoria wanted you all to know that she loves her parents dearly, respects the life they've built together, and wishes them nothing but happiness. She also wanted to make sure everyone understood that sometimes the people we think we know best are the ones who surprise us most. She closed the folder and walked back toward the kitchen, leaving my parents and their 150 guests to process what they'd just heard. Through the monitors I could see the immediate aftermath. Shocked faces, urgent whispered conversations, and my parents sitting frozen at their table like deer in headlights. Then my father's phone rang. I had called him from the office, knowing he would answer an unknown number during such a confused moment. "Dad," I said when he picked up, "I hope you're enjoying your anniversary dinner." "Victoria." His voice was barely audible. "What? How? Is this real?" "Every word. I'm actually here at the venue right now watching from the office. You and Mom look beautiful tonight. But I don't understand. How is this possible? How do you own?" "The same way you built your architecture firm, Dad. Hard work, smart investments, and patience. The only difference is you did it with buildings you designed and I did it with buildings I bought." Through the monitor, I could see him struggling to process this information while his guests watched and waited for some kind of explanation. "Victoria, can you come down here? Can we talk?" "Do you want me to, Dad? 3 hours ago, you were too ashamed of me to have me at your party." The cruelty in that statement hung between us. I wasn't trying to hurt him, but I needed him to understand the weight of what he'd said, what he'd done. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "We were wrong. About everything. I know you were, Dad. The question is what happens now." 10 minutes later I walked into the main dining room. The conversation didn't exactly stop, but it became much quieter as people tried to reconcile the simply dressed young woman entering the room with the $43 million real estate empire they'd just learned about. My parents stood as I approached their table. Mom looked like she'd been crying, though she was trying to maintain her composure in front of their guests. "Victoria," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I'm so sorry. We're so sorry." "I know, Mom." Dad pulled out a chair for me. The chair that would have been mine if they hadn't decided I was too embarrassing to include in their celebration. Can you explain this to us?" he asked. "How did we not know? How did we get everything so wrong?" I sat down and looked around the table at their closest friends, people who had known me since I was a child but had participated in years of conversations about my disappointing life choices. "It's actually pretty simple," I said. "You decided what success looked like, and when my life didn't match that picture you concluded I was failing. You never asked about my work because you'd already decided it wasn't real work. You never asked about my investments because you'd already decided I didn't have any money. You never asked about my plans because you'd already decided I didn't have any direction." Mr. Williams, Dad's business partner, found his voice first. "Victoria, when you say $43 million, I mean $43 million, Mr. Williams. Properties in California, Texas, and Florida. Commercial buildings, apartment complexes, retail centers. I started small, buying distressed properties and renovating them. Then I moved into larger acquisitions as my capital grew." Mrs. Patterson was staring at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "But honey, you live in that little apartment. You drive that old car." "Because I choose to live below my means. Because I'd rather invest my profits than spend them on status symbols. Because I've learned that the people whose opinions matter don't judge you based on your possessions." The implications of that last statement weren't lost on anyone at the table. "Victoria," Mom said, reaching for my hand. "How do we fix this? How do we make this right?" It was a fair question and one I'd been thinking about for 3 weeks. "You start by understanding that love isn't conditional on approval," I said. "You start by recognizing that there are many different ways to build a meaningful life. You start by asking questions instead of making assumptions." Dad nodded slowly. "We've been terrible parents to you, haven't we? You've been parents who love me but don't understand me. There's a difference." The rest of the evening unfolded in a surreal mixture of celebration and reckoning. My parents' friends peppered me with questions about real estate investing, market trends, and business strategy. People who had pitted me 6 hours earlier were now asking for investment advice. But the most meaningful conversation happened later, after most of the guests had left, and it was just my parents, my brother Jason, who had flown in from Seattle for the anniversary, and me sitting in the venue's elegant lounge. "I keep thinking about all the times we cut you off when you tried to talk about your work," Jason said. He was 2 years older than me and had always been the successful child, Harvard MBA, corporate consulting career, everything my parents understood and valued. You'd start to explain some investment strategy or market analysis, and we'd change the subject. Because you thought I was playing games instead of building a career. Because we thought we knew better, Mom said quietly. Because we thought our definitions of success were the only valid ones. Dad had been quiet for most of this conversation, clearly struggling to reconcile years of assumptions with the reality sitting across from him. Victoria, he finally said, can you forgive us? Can we start over? Dad, there's nothing to forgive. You raised me to be independent, to think for myself, to work hard for what I want. I did exactly what you taught me to do. I just did it in a way you didn't recognize. But we were so wrong about everything. You were wrong about the details, but you weren't wrong about the values. You taught me that success comes from hard work and smart decisions. You taught me to be responsible with money. You taught me to treat people with respect regardless of their circumstances. All of those lessons shaped how I built my business. Jason was shaking his head in amazement. And we spent years feeling sorry for you. While I was feeling sorry for myself because I thought my family didn't believe in me. It was Mom who understood first. We did believe in you, sweetheart. We just didn't believe in your path. Which is the same thing, Mom. When you tell someone their choices are wrong, you're telling them they're wrong. The next few months brought a complete transformation in our family dynamic. Instead of tolerating my phase, my parents became genuinely interested in my work. Dad started consulting me on real estate investments for his firm's expansion plans. Mom began attending real estate investment seminars and reading market analysis reports. Jason, humbled by discovering that his little sister had quietly built something larger than his consulting practice, asked if I would consider partnering with him on some commercial development projects. Most surprisingly, they began introducing me to their friends not as their eccentric daughter, but as a successful businesswoman whose insights might be valuable. The change wasn't just in how they saw me, it was in how they saw success itself. They began to understand that wealth could be built quietly, that success didn't always require public recognition, and that their daughter's modest lifestyle was a choice, not a limitation. 6 months later, we celebrated my 31st birthday at the Grandview estate. This time I was there not as the hidden owner but as the guest of honor. The same people who had witnessed my parents' embarrassment at their anniversary party now saw them beaming with pride as they introduced their daughter, the real estate investor. During the dinner, Patricia Hendricks approached our table with a smile. "Miss Chen," she said, "I wanted you to know that tonight's event has been complimentary, courtesy of the venue's management." My parents looked confused until I explained. "One of the benefits of owning the place," I said with a smile. "Family events are always on the house." Dad shook his head in amazement. "I'm still getting used to the idea that my daughter owns half the commercial real estate in the city." "Not half, Dad. About 15%. But I'm working on it." As the evening wound down, Mom pulled me aside for a private conversation. "Victoria, I need to tell you something," she said, her eyes serious. "That night at our anniversary when Patricia read your message, it was the most ashamed I've ever been in my life." "Mom, you don't need to." "Yes, I do. I was ashamed, but not of you. I was ashamed of myself. Ashamed that I had raised a daughter who was strong enough to build an empire in silence while her own family dismissed her achievements. Ashamed that you handled our cruelty with such grace and dignity." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "You could have humiliated us that night. You could have made us look foolish in front of everyone we care about. Instead, you taught us something about love, about family, about the difference between punishment and education." I hugged her then, feeling something shift between us that had been broken for years. "I love you, Mom. I've always loved you. I just needed you to see me. I see you now, sweetheart. And I'm so proud of who you are." Driving home that night, I reflected on the journey from that painful text message to this moment of genuine family connection. The $43 million in real estate had been satisfying to build, but the relationships I'd rebuilt were worth infinitely more. My phone buzzed with a message from Jason, "Proud to be your brother. Sorry it took me so long to say that." Then one from Dad, "Thank you for teaching us what success really looks like." And finally one from Mom, "You are the best part of your father and me combined. I should have seen that years ago." I smiled, pulling into the parking lot of my modest apartment building, the same building I'd lived in throughout my entire real estate empire building journey. Some of my tenants in other properties lived in more luxurious spaces, but this little place would always be home. Because sometimes the most radical thing you can do is refuse to let other people's definitions of success change who you are. Sometimes the greatest victory is not needing to prove your worth to anyone. Not even family. But when family finally sees you for who you really are. That's not just success. That's everything.